Following the initial success of Operation Market Time, a joint mission between the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard to patrol the coasts and waterways of South Vietnam from communist smuggling, the Navy launched the ambitious Operation Game Warden. Contrary to Market Time, the vessels in this operation were tasked with going deeper into the Mekong Delta and the Rung Sat zone to obliterate the Viet Cong and its supply networks. Swiftboats armed with mortars, M2 Browning machine guns, and even flamethrowers comprised Task Force 116, which was sent not just to police the rivers of South Vietnam, but also to engage the enemy with support from helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft. To pull all of this off, the American patrol boats cooperated closely with special operations such as Navy SEALs, MACV-SOG, and CIA agents on infiltration, extraction, and search and rescue operations. From intense river firefights to shore ambushes, desperate supply operations, and scattered Army and Marines outposts, Task Force 116 would tirelessly fight to keep the rivers of South Vietnam safe until the very last days of the war. Operation Game Warden. Operation Game Warden was conceived to overcome the deficiencies of the South Vietnamese Navy. During the summer of 1965, it became clear to the U.S. forces that their ally, River Force, was not up to securing the waterways of the Rung Sat Special Zone, or RSSZ, and the Mekong Delta. Almost 40% of the South Vietnamese population lived in the watery region of the RSSZ, and most of the country's rice was produced in these fertile lands. Moreover, the more than 3,000 nautical miles of natural waterways in the zone allowed farmers to transport crops to local markets effortlessly. However, this was not without its disadvantages in a country where conflict had been raging between the North and the South for more than a decade. The Viet Cong guerrilla operated battalion-sized units across South Vietnam with impunity, and the South Vietnamese River Force could not stop the communists from growing strong on the shores of the Mekong and the RSSZ. From setting up improvised bases to establishing levy taxes and seizing supplies from the locals, the Viet Cong had steadily infiltrated the South through the waterways and imposed terror. The Americans soon realized they had no chance against the North while their rear was infested with enemies. To achieve victory, the Viet Cong and the thousands of tons worth of supplies they were smuggling into the South had to disappear from the Mekong. Task Force 116. In September of 1965, several officers from MACV, the Naval Advisory Group Vietnam, and the Office of the Chief of Naval Operations met at Saigon to discuss the communist riverine infiltration. As a result, Task Force 116 was created on December 18, 1965. It was also called the River Patrol Force, and it would comprise over 120 river patrol craft. Task Force 116 would be part of Operation Game Warden, a combined U.S. Navy and Republic of Vietnam Navy operation to prevent the communists from moving and resupplying across the rivers of the Mekong Delta and the RSSZ. The workhorse of the task force was the PBR, or Patrol Boat Riverine, with 31-foot river patrol boats that would team up with the U.S. Army Mobile Riverine Force to locate, surround, and destroy communist forces. TF-116 was put under the control of the Navy Advisory Group, and the river patrol craft was split into two task groups. The Rung Sat Patrol Group, or TG-116.2, would comprise 40 boats and operate in the RSSZ. On the other hand, the Delta River Patrol Group, or TG-116.1, would operate in the Mekong Delta with 10 boats, but its numbers would eventually increase. The objectives of Game Warden and TF-116 were to patrol the major inland rivers, search for suspicious craft, enforce curfews, and keep the main shipping channels within Saigon by patrolling the Long Tao River. Armed to the teeth. There were two variants of the PBR, the Mark I and the Mark II. The boats were made with a fiberglass hull and had a beam of 11.5 feet and a draft of 2 feet. The PBR displaced 14,600 pounds and was propelled by 2 jacuzzi water jet pumps, powered by 2 220 horsepower General Motors diesel engines that allowed speeds of over 20 and 30 knots. The PBR itself was a fast, highly maneuverable, and responsive boat at the hands of an able captain, and was powered by 2 180 horsepower Detroit diesel 6V53N engines that gave way to speeds of over 32 miles per hour. Offensive armament comprised a twin 50 caliber machine gun in a forward turret and a single 50 caliber machine gun located aft. A 40mm grenade launcher and an M60 machine gun were located on port and starboard amidships. Additionally, the PBR was equipped with a Raytheon Pathfinder surface search radar and 2 AN/VRC-46 radios for communication. The fiberglass hull was resistant to tornado worms that lived in the Vietnamese rivers. However, it was not immune to shrapnel from RPGs and other explosives. As such, armor plates protected the engines and the coxswain in the control cockpit. The 4-man crew comprised a boat captain, a seaman, an engine man, and a gunner's mate. The men often carried M16s, shotguns, M79 grenade launchers, a Starlight night vision device, and a 60mm mortar. Finally, another vessel that took part in Operation Game Warden was the 36-foot-long Landing Craft Personnel Large Patrol Boat, or LCPL, which was used for boarding and searching sampans along the Rung Sat zone. Overcoming the Viet Cong. In March of 1966, the Marines, the Navy, and the South Vietnamese forces launched Operation Jackstay to cleanse the Rung Sat swamp of the Viet Cong. From Navy PBRs to minesweepers, helicopters, Marines, and Navy SEALs, the operation was an admirable joint effort. After 2 weeks of intense combat at land and sea, the American forces captured more than 70 enemy troops and destroyed multiple supply bases, training facilities, and other locations that limited the enemy's area of operations. Task Force 116 eventually took control of the Rung Sat Special Zone and the Long Tao. Multiple river patrol bases were established at Cat Lo, Tra Ngoc, Binh Thuy, and other locations where U.S. Navy control increased and the Viet Cong's strength diminished. Besides the support of land forces, TF-116 was assisted by the Helicopter Attack Light Squadron 3, or HAL-3 Seawolves. This squadron of lethal UH-1B Iroquois helicopters operated in pairs and destroyed every vessel or enemy attempting to escape the river forces. In late 1966, the force's PBRs befriended a more agile aircraft, the OB-10A Bronco, which bolstered the close air support capabilities of the Game Warden forces. Both the aircraft and the helicopters converged at the mouth of major rivers to take out objectives. The air crews had 24-hour shifts to offer PBRs unlimited air support at all times, while the PBRs worked in pairs in a specific sector of the Mekong Delta. This strategy translated into 12-hour, two-boat, day and night patrols. Moreover, any vessel was considered hostile during nighttime operations. Contrary to daylight activities, in which the Navy conducted police labor at the rivers, the nights usually turned violent if a sampan failed to follow orders. Inserting Navy SEALs. The River Patrol Force not only took charge of PBRs and stopped the communists from smuggling supplies into South Vietnam, but was also tasked with special operations. As MACV-SOG, Marine Force Recon, Navy SEALs, and CIA agents began to operate deeper into hostile territory for classified operations, the PBR became an essential asset to insert and extract operators without attracting attention. Likewise, a key to the success of the riverine warfare forces that were part of Operation Game Warden was the intelligence of enemy movements provided by the Navy SEAL commandos. The River Patrol Force boats inserted the SEALs, provided gunfire support to neutralize Vietnamese forces, and stood near the extraction points to keep the commandos out of harm's way. In 1967, 2 years after the establishment of Game Warden, the Atlantic SEAL Team 2 deployed 3 platoons to Vietnam to conduct operations throughout the Mekong Delta. Rivers, harbors, estuaries, and land areas close to the coasts began the testing grounds for these naval commandos. Meanwhile, SEAL Team 1 operated from Na Bay, south of Saigon, to support Task Force 116 in the Rung Sat Special Zone. The Navy patrol boats were in close contact with the SEALs to coordinate attacks against the enemy or intercept hostile contraband. Operating in the zone was complex for the patrol boats and the commandos. In 1968, an officer from a SEAL detachment wrote in a report, quote, "The foliage is so thick that it is not unlikely for a patrol to be within a Viet Cong base camp and not realize it. Visibility is sometimes only 5 to 10 feet, and silent movement is practically impossible. In a firefight with a concealed enemy at a range of 5 to 10 meters, the possibility of losing at least the first 2 members of a friendly patrol is great." Despite the fight against nature, the SEALs always carried on with their duties and continued gathering intelligence for Task Force 116, providing valuable information about enemy plans, unit numbers, and combat capabilities. River Police results. Operation Game Warden escalated following the Tet Offensive of 1968. However, Task Force 116 kept the hostile forces at bay with the support of the Sea Wolves and ground troops. Game Warden ended in March of 1973 with the Vietnamization of all the armed forces operating in the country and the slow American withdrawal. Ultimately, the PBRs racked up over 70,000 patrol hours and more than 80 engagements with hostile forces. They also participated in over 60 missions with Navy SEALs, Sea Wolves, and LST vessels, destroying more than 80 enemy watercraft and more than 120 enemy supply networks, bases, and other infrastructure. From 1965 to 1973, Task Force 116 lost 200 sailors, but still achieved one of the highest kill ratios of U.S. forces during the Vietnam War. Thank you for watching our video. Please like and subscribe to our Dark Documentaries channels to find more exciting historical content. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to be notified of our newest videos. Stay tuned for more.